several weeks ago now, we invited Tom to give a personal testimony, and Peggy, his wife, decided that it's time to give hers. And we haven't had time in our worship service to make that available to her, but now we finally have the time. Peggy?
Good morning. Happy Sabbath.
Morning.
Happy Sabbath. I'm really grateful for this church. God has blessed me tremendously with it and with you all, and I love it here, and I'm so thankful. A couple months ago, God told me He wanted me to share my testimony. I've shared my testimony in the past, but this time it would be a little different because I'm going to share things I've never shared with anyone outside of some of my family and Tom. I wasn't ready to share certain painful points, but God told me it was time. And in the last few weeks, there's been tears. There's been pain as I've been going over some of these things, but He's been there right beside me. He's held my hand through it, and He has completely enveloped me with His love and His care in this process. I grew up in Maryland, just about 10 miles outside of Baltimore City. My parents were married, and I'm the youngest of 4 children. There's a big gap between us. My oldest sister is 12 years older than me. My mom always told me that before she got pregnant with me, she prayed and prayed and prayed that she wanted one more child, and then I came. Now, my oldest sister said, I don't think so. I think you were a surprise. But my mom stood to it, and I think she did. For all the time she told me, I think she silently prayed. She was a Christian, and she had a strong faith in God. As I'm growing up, my dad is hardworking, patient, kind, loving, quiet but funny, and very emotionally mature. A former Marine, a hard worker. He went into corrections and within 5 years went from a prison guard to a captain. We shared a love of art. We'd go to the art museums together, and one of his favorite artists was Monet, which became my favorite artist as well. Some of my fondest memories with my dad are going to Washington, D.C. and going to all the art museums. He read all the time and studied history and art. My mom, vivacious. Redhead with beautiful eyes. She has a smile that lights up a room. My sister's friends would call her mom. Everybody called her mom. My fondest memories with her are laughing with her. We would laugh so hard over something, and tears would just come down our face. We were at a restaurant once, and we were laughing so hard that the server decided to just leave and come back. They were like, okay, I'm going to let you get your composure, and I'll come back in a few minutes, and then you can order. In my home, the words I love you were said frequently to me by my parents, and those words were meant sincerely and genuinely. It's a love I felt deeply, and that would help define me and who I would become. It was a love that I wanted to emulate with my own children. My childhood started off pretty good. I was very funny, active. I got a lot of attention because I was the youngest, but the summer after first grade, things would take a severe change for me. My grandparents, who had lived out of state, moved close by within 10 minutes, and my grandfather was at our home almost every day, and he sexually abused me. I never told anyone. Later, when I was an adult, I would learn that I wasn't the only victim in my family. And my grandfather conveniently moved to where we were living because of the age I was, the age that he preferred, the same age of other girls in my family that he would hurt. The happy, carefree childhood that I had become very tainted. At age 12 to 14, I was bullied throughout middle school and high school quite severely by multiple people. I was rejected, I was treated cruelly, and I never understood why I was so nice. I tried to be so nice to everyone. I didn't understand why I was such an easy target. It was painful. I was lonely. And then on top of that, I had an older brother. And he wasn't the typical older brother mean. He was very verbally abusive, physically abusive at times. And it hurt more with him because I was like, he's supposed to love me. He's supposed to be my protective older brother, right? Not the one to hit me, not the one to tell me I'm worthless, not the one to tell me I'm a nobody all the time. Have you ever been there? As a child or as an adult, have you been rejected? Have you felt lonely? You know what I learned later in life, and I wish I had known as a kid? People don't matter. I've got Jesus. The only one I needed to accept me and to be my friend was Jesus, and he is. He's there for me. It was painful. It hurt. Many years of abuse in different ways, but he was with me. Things won't be perfect. You're not going to not have struggles, but I guarantee you, I'm here to tell you, he'll get you through it. As an adult, it was really life-changing for me when I realized that I can go to God for anything and everything. He cares about the smallest detail to the biggest concern that you have. All you need to do is accept him. He's there waiting for you. If only we looked at ourselves the way God looks at us. He looks at us as perfection. He created us. We're unique, we're different, we're special to him. For the majority of my younger years, I felt like I cared and loved others way more than they ever cared and loved for me. Is there someone in your life you need to forgive? Let me ask you, do you think it's impossible? Do you think there's no way you can do it? Are you carrying hurt and a burden that you think that will never heal? God can get you through it.
Amen.
I had someone else I needed to forgive, not just my grandfather. At age 16, I met a boy. I'd later learned that he had lied about his age, and he was not 17. He was a very young-looking 21-year-old. Despite saying no, he forced himself on me, and he sexually assaulted me. When he was done, immediately after, he asked me not to hate him and to forgive him. Saying no, saying stop meant nothing to him. I was completely ignored. It was very painful. My mom was there for me. I didn't tell anyone for a while. My friends, I didn't tell my family for a while. My mom would sleep on the floor in a sleeping bag and hold my hand at night because I started to be afraid of the dark and have a lot of fears. A couple of years later, I saw that young man. I was at a 4th of July parade, and I saw him going down the street free, and I was so angry. I couldn't believe it. I ran up to him, and my older sister ran up to him with me. I looked at him, and he was facing me, and I could tell he had no idea who I was. He had a blank stare on his face. He didn't recognize me, and it made me furious. I couldn't believe the boy whose face I would never forget, whose actions against me I would never forget, had no idea who I was. I asked him, I said, "Do you know who I am?" He said no, and looked so puzzled. I said some very, very nasty things to him. I was so angry. And then I walked away, and my sister took me away. Now, my mom, like I said, she was a Christian. She loved Jesus. She read the Bible every day. She did her best to do everything, right. She goes running after him. And at first, I thought she was going to tell him off. First, I was like, yeah, go, Mom. But you know what? She didn't. She came back, and I was angrier. She told me that she told him she forgave him and that she had prayed for him and hopes he turns to God. How could she? I felt like she had betrayed me, but later I calmed down. Now I know she had been just as devastated, but in a different way at what happened to me. It was very painful for her too. Now, because I've forgiven him, I'm glad she did. I know the power of words and how they can hurt and last with you. And when I forgave him, I prayed, God, please take those awful things I said to him away. My mom had the grace and the Christian maturity and love for God. She loved God more than not forgiving him. She forgave him and did what I couldn't do at the time. If you need to forgive someone, it will set you free, and I pray that you do it. Okay, age 19. Things are getting a little bit better. Our family gets news that would change our life forever. My mom gets diagnosed with cancer, and it's bad. I was with her on the phone after she got diagnosed, and they were trying to determine what stage she was. And I can picture it like yesterday when she got the phone call. It was breast cancer and in 17 lymph nodes. It was stage 3. She would need a bone marrow transplant that they didn't even know if she would survive. There was a 30% chance she'd make it through the transplant, and then only 20 to 30% chance she might live 5 years. But God, she lived. She lived. She had almost 5 years where she did wonderful. God. 5-year mark, though, I get a call. The cancer is back. Now, when she had first gotten diagnosed, as bad as it was and as dire as it was, God had spoken to me and he told me she was not going to die. It wasn't denial. I've learned his voice. I've known to trust it now. He absolutely had told me she wasn't going to die at that point when she first got diagnosed, and I just knew it. But 5 years later, when she got diagnosed, he prepared me. And he said, Peggy, she's not going to survive this time. It's the worst. It's watching someone you love deteriorate, watching them so heavily medicated that they don't even recognize you. It's a slow grieving process. And then you know they're going to die, and you think you're ready for it, but you're not, because you don't understand the finality until it really happens, and then it's 100 times worse. I was with my mom when she died. I was holding her hand when she took her last breath. My dad and I get extremely close. I'd always wanted my dad around me and so forth. And my family and I are close after my mom dies. Just a few months later, I get a phone call. I had moved to California. My dad says, Peggy, I have some news for you. Listen carefully. My older sister had a blood clot in her lung, and they didn't expect her to survive. He said, you need to come home. I couldn't believe it. The next day, I get a call. There's been a mistake. Thank God. It was pneumonia. They had read the scans wrong, and what they thought was a blood clot was pneumonia. But I'm telling you, those were the longest hours of my life, thinking I was now going to say goodbye to my sister. A few years later, things are good in between. Things are good. I have Drew, my oldest son. He's amazing, and I'm so grateful I had him when I did, because he wasn't planned, but God had a plan. And if my oldest son hadn't been born when he was, my parents wouldn't have gotten to meet him and have a relationship with him. It's the biggest blessing to watch the love they had for my son and see that relationship. A few years go by, and my sister calls me. I'm at work. I told my coworker, my sister never calls me. This is not good, I know it. I didn't want to answer the phone. Peggy, you need to sit down. My dad they thought he had a stroke, and it was bad. She calls me back. I thought she was calling to tell me he had died. It was stage 4 cancer. He had cancer in his brain and lungs, and they couldn't even give us a time for how long he'd live. Devastation. Complete devastation. I can tell you in my life, I have cried so many tears. I feel like I could fill up a pool. The loneliness, the hurt, the feeling of helplessness, and that I just can't get through. I can't cry anymore, God. I can't take much more of this. But him, he got me through. It wasn't easy, but he got me through. My dad would die, and it was very dark. I'll admit it was very dark. I was angry. I was hollow. The 2 years after that were a blur. It really, really was. Let me leave you with this. If you've suffered loss, heartbreak, been abused, felt unloved, I have too. God will help you get through it. He has blessed me so much. I have a loving husband. I've got beautiful kids. I've had this church. I was afraid to get close to people because I lost so many. I closed my heart up because I didn't want to get hurt. I figured if I don't let anyone in, I can't get close to them, and then I can't be hurt when I lose them. If I don't put myself out there, I won't get rejected. This is a story of how he's changed me for the better. God has. He took a girl who felt lonely and heartbroken, who was abused, and turned her into a woman who knows she belongs and is loved. A girl that was once very afraid of the dark, couldn't breathe in small places, and turned her into a brave and confident woman because Jesus is more powerful than anything the enemy can bring against you. Amen. Thank you.